Okay, get ready because today we are going deep into a world most people don't get to see up close. Home hospice death vigils. You're basically getting a backstage pass to these really personal and powerful final moments.
It's a topic that I think people don't talk about a lot.
Hmm.
There's a lot of mystery, even some fear around it.
Yeah, exactly. And to help us understand it better, we have this super interesting research article, The Secrets of the Backstage, Directing Death Vigils. It came out just last year in the Journal of Palliative Medicine. What's really neat about it is it's based on interviews with actual hospice staff, the people who are right there experiencing these vigils firsthand.
Yeah, it's like we get to peek behind the curtain
Yeah.
and we get to see not just the medical stuff, but all the emotional and logistical stuff that most people don't even think about.
And hopefully by the end of this deep dive, you'll have a way better idea of what families and hospice workers experience during these vigils, and maybe how we can all support them better during such a hard time. So instead of just thinking about someone passing away, what if you imagined it as the final act of a play? A drama happening in someone's home. That's kind of how the researchers looked at this topic. They used something called dramaturgical theory.
It's wild, right? Because in a way, the hospice staff are like the directors of this whole drama. They decide when the curtain goes up on the vigil, when they start using terms like actively dying or imminent, that's when you know death is probably only a few days or hours away.
But death doesn't always stick to the script. The researchers actually share this really sad story about a patient who went into hospice and died within 1 day.
Whoa.
Yeah, 24 hours.
Wow, that's got to be hard for families to be so unprepared, especially if they thought the vigil would go a certain way. It really shows you that the hospice team needs to be flexible and communicate super clearly so everyone's on the same page.
Okay, so let's say the curtain is up now. We're in the middle of the vigil. The article talks about the real practical stuff, the staging of this last act. One thing that stood out to me was how tricky it can be to get all the medical equipment into a home, like trying to fit a hospital bed in a tiny room or down a narrow hallway.
Oh, for sure. It's a logistical thing a lot of families don't think about. But it's not just about the logistics. You also have the emotional side. Families want their loved one to be comfortable, especially in those final moments.
Yeah.
They want them to be in their own bed with their own things around them. It's about keeping things feeling normal, even with all the craziness and uncertainty going on.
But families have so much responsibility, especially when it comes to giving medications. I remember reading about one family that was scared to give morphine. They were worried it would make their loved one die sooner.
Totally understandable, those worries are. That's where hospice nurses are so important. Their expertise is so valuable. They can teach families how to use pain meds correctly and debunk all the myths and fears. They empower families to feel good about giving care.
So it's almost like they're guiding these families across this emotional and logistical tightrope, giving them reassurance the whole way.
Absolutely. And it's not just the physical stuff either. They also help families deal with all the complex family dynamics that pop up during these times.
Yeah, things can get pretty intense, huh? Think about it. You're dealing with old arguments, strained relationships, all while you're about to lose someone you love.
It's like an emotional overload, for sure.
Yeah.
The article talks about how sometimes family members are suddenly flooded with guilt, realizing their relationship with the person wasn't always great.
That must be so tough for everyone. And then you add in all the visits from extended family who all have different opinions on everything. From medical decisions to funeral plans, it's like trying to juggle a bunch of emotional grenades.
Oh, for sure. And on top of all that emotional weight, you have the physical changes that come with dying. The article gets pretty real, describing some of the tough sights and sounds that families might see and hear.
It's not easy to witness that, that's for sure. One nurse mentioned how disturbing the death rattle can be. That gurgling sound that happens when the body's shutting down, it can really shake families up, even though it usually doesn't mean the patient is suffering. It's one of those things that can stick with you even after the person is gone.
It just goes to show you how powerful those sensory experiences are. They get mixed up with your memories and your grief. And then, there's the constant physical care that needs to be done, changing diapers, repositioning the patient, managing symptoms. It's draining in every way.
Which brings us to how important the hospice staff are. They're not just there for medical care, but for emotional support, guidance, and to be partners with families who are feeling lost and overwhelmed.
Yeah, they create a space where families can feel heard, understood, and empowered to make the right decisions for them and for their loved one.
One nurse in the study actually said it's super important to normalize dying for families. to help them understand that what they're seeing is natural, even if it's hard. It's about making them less anxious and less alone.
That shared sense of humanity, it's so powerful. And it doesn't stop when the patient dies. Hospice staff are there to help during the time after death, too, which comes with its own challenges and emotions.
So it's almost like the play isn't quite over, even though the curtains close. There's still things to do, arrangements to make, and grief to work through.
Right. Hospice staff help families with those immediate tasks, offer support as they grieve, and make sure the body is treated with dignity and respect. It's that same compassionate care just continuing.
It's like one last act of kindness, a way of honoring the life that's passed. There was this really touching story in the article about a nurse who would use the patient's own perfume or lotion when cleaning their body, so the family would smell something familiar and comforting. It's the little things that make such a difference in those vulnerable moments.
It's all about acknowledging the person, even in death, and helping the family feel a sense of connection. We've been talking about how much families and hospice staff have to do during these vigils, and it seems like the current regulations actually make those challenges harder.
Exactly. The article talks about how this system, with its intermittent care, puts a lot of strain and inconsistency on everything, especially since it relies so heavily on that 24-hour on-call system.
It's like trying to put a puzzle together when you're missing pieces. Families end up doing most of the caregiving themselves, and they only get limited help from hospice. And when they do need help, they might get a different nurse every time they call.
So it's got to be frustrating and confusing for a family that's already going through so much. And then on the other hand, for the nurses who are always on call, it leads to burnout, being tired all the time, and ultimately people leaving the profession. It's like a domino effect affecting everyone.
Yeah, it's like the system itself is burned out, you
Yeah.
know. And that's really what the article is trying to show us, the real struggles of the people who are giving this care.
The unsung heroes, for sure. They're putting so much of themselves into this work, but it comes with a cost.
Exactly. One nurse talked about how emotionally draining it is to see so many people die, especially after you get close to them and their family.
You can just feel how heavy it is for them when you read their words. It's a kind of emotional weight most of us can't imagine.
It's like carrying the weight of all those goodbyes, yeah. And then on top of that, there's the workload. The
Yeah.
paperwork never ends. You're pulled in so many directions.
It was crazy reading about how much time hospice nurses spend just on documentation, making sure everything's recorded, following all the rules. I mean, it's important, but it takes away from the time they could be with patients and families, actually connecting with them.
It's a no-win situation, really. They want to give everything to the patients, but the system makes them focus on checking boxes instead of holding hands.
So it's not a surprise that so many people burn out in this job. I mean, who wouldn't be exhausted and drained after dealing with all that emotional and logistical stuff all the time?
The researchers point this out as a big problem, not just for the hospice workers, but for the quality of care the patients get too. I mean, if the caregivers are burned out, how can they possibly give the kind of compassionate care people need at the end of life?
It's like a ripple effect. The strain on the system affects the caregivers, and then that affects the patients and their families.
But the article doesn't just focus on the problems. It offers some interesting solutions, like starting with a pretty big change in the care model. Instead of this intermittent care, they suggest a continuous care model.
So instead of just coming and going, hospice workers would be in the home more consistently, especially in those last few days.
Right. That way families would get the support they need, and nurses wouldn't be so stretched thin. They wouldn't always be responding to emergencies and trying to keep up with the on-call system.
That sounds like a good solution for everyone, but I imagine it would be tough to actually implement, logistically and financially.
Oh, definitely. Medicare only pays for that intermittent care model right now. So changing the system would require some big policy changes. But the researchers argue that the good stuff for both patients and hospice workers would outweigh those challenges in the long run.
It's about thinking long term, right? And seeing that if we invest in a system that's more sustainable and compassionate, it will help everyone in the end. But, continuous care is just one part of it. The article also says hospice workers need better training and support.
For sure. We can't expect them to deal with all this emotional weight without giving them tools to cope with compassion fatigue and burnout.
So things like counseling, support groups, mindfulness training, anything that helps them process all those difficult emotions and take care of their own well-being.
Exactly. We need to realize that how they're doing directly affects the quality of care they can provide. And it's not just about supporting the workers, it's about empowering the families too.
I'm so glad you brought that up. The article really pushes for better education and resources for family caregivers, especially when it comes to understanding what's happening and feeling more confident about giving care.
It's tough to be thrown into this role without any preparation. You have to make huge decisions while dealing with your own grief. It's a lot to handle.
And it doesn't have to be that way. If families have the right education and support, they can feel more prepared, more in control, and ultimately better able to handle this tough situation.
Yeah, they become active participants instead of just watching it all happen, caught up in emotions and uncertainty. It's about giving them a sense of control, even when they're facing a loss.
Listening to you talk about all this, it seems like all these solutions are pointing to a more holistic approach to end of life care. Whether it's continuous care, support for professionals, or empowering families, it's all about being more compassionate.
Right. It's about shifting the focus from just managing the medical side of dying to looking at the whole human experience.
It's about understanding that death isn't just a medical thing, it's a huge life transition that affects us physically, emotionally, and spiritually. And we need a care system that honors all of that.
It's about making quality of life, dignity, and connection the priorities, right up until the very end.
And that takes a group effort. We need policymakers to make systems that allow for continuous care and give enough resources to families and professionals. We need healthcare providers to communicate with compassion and educate people proactively.
And as a society, we need to stop avoiding conversations about death and dying. The more we talk about it, the less scary it will be. The more we understand it, the better prepared we'll be when we have to face it, for ourselves and for our loved ones.
So, what does all this mean for you, the listener? What can you take away from this deep dive into home hospice death vigils? If you or someone you love is facing the end of life, remember you're not alone. There's help out there and people who care.
Don't be afraid to ask for help. And speak up for the best possible care. Have those honest conversations about what you need and what you want. And if you feel like making a difference, you can always support organizations that are fighting for better end-of-life care. Volunteer, donate, or just talk about this important issue to raise awareness.